And I was like, oh, do I order it from like Noel Leeming or do I just take the chance? And I was like, no, stuff it. I'm going to order it from the Apple store. And it got sent from Sydney and arrived within a day. And I was like, get the fuck out. This is so good. Yeah, so we got it yesterday. And I was like, yes, because Luke has like set up our whole... Oh, he had so much fun, and he then like reconnected all our tech. So our like Alexa now connects to the TV, to the Apple TV. It's so funny. The remote has a little dictaphone, and you can talk to Siri from anywhere and like tell her to do stuff on the Apple TV. It's
oh my God.
Great.
Yeah.
So it's really leveled up our next 2 weeks of like watching Netflix.
Lockdown. Yeah.
Exactly.
I'll just sit here and do nothing.
It's the little things.
It is. Was Croissant Gate a thing? Was that what had happened yesterday?
Yeah, it was a total thing. And he is supposedly rectifying the situation by he got our neighbours involved to make another like street order, group delivery from Daily Bread. Again, apparently getting Croissant round 2 today at some point, but I'll believe it when I see it.
I didn't have my croissants yesterday. I got really busy, so I'm like that's the reason I was thinking about it, because I'm like, okay, I'm going to do that today.
I need them. I know. So I can't really complain though, because he has like made dinner every night pretty much of lockdown. I've cooked probably 3 times this whole lockdown, so you know, I can't give him too much crap.
That's fine. How are you, Christine?
Yeah, good. I actually overslept and only just got up.
I was just saying, because I got caught on a call and I was like 10 minminutes away, and I put the makeup on and get the coffee and
get all the things. Have you had coffee, Christine?
You're in a safe space.
Like 8:45.
Safe space. Nice. Take that while you can. I didn't get up and exercise this morning. I stepped into and had snuggles with the puppy instead, and that was good for my soul.
Yeah.
Oh, I love it.
Love it.
It's a great way to start the day.
Yes. Yeah, it is. It really is. Shall we kick off with the collateral capture?
Yeah.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Oh my gosh, my voice. Sorry.
I'm really looking forward to seeing how, you're back and forwards on this.
Different we are. Being interviewed.
It's going to be great.
Yes. I'm quite excited.
Good.
I was thinking about all the stories that I have to like talk about in my answers.
That's what we're here for.
Do I need to start this? I was like, my name's first. Do you want me to do the first sentence? Are you good, Christine?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay, perfect. Too easy. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Hi, I'm Cash.
And I'm Christine.
And we're not only the co-hosts of It's No Secret, but the marketing geniuses behind Kernel.
As you know from Dean's recent episode, at Kernel we help to grow the money of everyday Kiwis like the world's most sophisticated investors.
We're here as guests for the Rosie on Recruitment and Career podcast, talking about our career journeys. We hope you enjoy it.
Yay!
Second.
It's the easiest bit of the whole show.
Isn't it? I was getting a little something in your audio. I don't know if you can hear that, Kat, on Christine's audio, or is it fine your end? Can you hear it fine?
There was a little bit of dropout, but I didn't. Yeah, I feel like it was your internet though, Christine.
Right.
Is it my internet?
Or just, yeah. Although, funnily enough, that episode that you said the other day, CJ, that we were recording, and you know how at one point you're like, it dropped out. It didn't on the recording at all.
Oh,
yeah, I had that recently too, because Russ dropped out for I think like a minute and a half, and I was like, oh dear, but then it just merged it back together at the same spot. So,
and it was all
Zencaster seems to do that. Yeah, I'm like, if you just ride the wave with Zencaster and don't stop it, and people connect back in, it'll pick it up.
Yeah.
Yay, Zencaster! Shout out to you.
I know. You're such a great system.
I just turned my mic down a little bit because I think it might be that it was like a bit loud. So hopefully that works.
Cool. Shall we jump in then? This question is obviously for both of you. Whoever wants to start can. But what does recruitment and career mean to you?
Oh, I'm happy to start with this one because I feel like for a really long time, recruitment didn't really mean anything to me because I'd never had to recruit anyone before until recent times, stepping into what is now a not so small business. So I guess, on that side, obviously being head of marketing and part of like the founding team at Kernel, we've grown really rapidly over the last 2 years and we've all sort of been thrown into recruitment in a way that I hadn't really experienced before. I had experience, I guess, hiring a couple of people in smaller teams in previous businesses or being part of the interview process, but I found there's quite a difference between being part of the interview process and kind of giving your views and then actually making the decision around whether someone should or shouldn't get a job or be part of the team. So recruitment for me right now is basically a learning journey or, trying to absorb as much information as to how, really understand, I guess, yourself, but then also the business that you work in and what are the types of people and skill sets that you need as part of that. So it's very much a journey of self-reflection, which I guess also pairs quite nicely to your career, right? Because I think a lot of our careers are also taking the time and space to reflect introspectively and really understand what it is that we want to do and what drives us and gets us out of bed in the morning, which I know Christine and I talk a lot about in terms of, career. We have lots of chats on the podcast about it, but then also at work, which is really fun. So, yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's definitely such a great dynamic.
I'll just jump in.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
I guess the good thing with that is like we have the nice safe space on the podcast to talk about things and then that kind of carries through to work anyway. So, we have a lot of open discussions around each of our career progression kind of as like friends and colleagues, but then we also have this dynamic of, I'm in the senior leadership team at work and Christine reports into us. So it's kind of that nice, I guess sometimes she likes to get the insights of, what should I prepare for this meeting or this discussion? And I'm like, well, let me tell you. So there's a lot of open honesty in the workplace, which is great.
Yeah, it's really helpful because then I'm like, okay, so that's how that person works and understanding. I feel like a big part of your job and career is just understanding people, right? Of like, how do I need to work with you to get what I need to do my job well? So it's a nice insight. But yeah, yes. So on my side, recruitment is a little bit different in that my first job actually out of finishing my degree was working at a recruitment agency. So I worked there for about 2 weeks and it was very transactional and I really didn't enjoy it. And so then I handed in my notice and I was only there for a total of 6 weeks because I had to work out my notice. And so that was my initial perception of it. And I think that has changed a little bit as I've had different experiences being on the other side of finding a job with the help of a recruiter. So my job at Hatch was found through a recruiter and she was great. But I did find that there was quite a difference between the story that I was sold about the job and then what the reality of that job was. Nice. And I think that is probably a little bit of a gap that I'm sure some people can experience. But yeah, I think now I would have a very different lens on it because I would be going more to a recruiter for different reasons, I think, like to get perspective about, salary or, benchmarking and things like that. So I feel like there's a different role that you can play.
Yeah, definitely. And segueing really nicely into the career piece, just telling you've shared a little bit about your early career there, starting off in recruitment, not loving that. But what has set you on that path then, Christine? And was there a career defining moment to get you to where you are now? You mentioned Hatch, but what else?
Yeah, so I guess going back a step further to high school, I studied business and it was kind of the thing that my family suggested to, it's a broad career. You can change a lot. Why not do that? And I was really interested in actually like creativity, so photography. and things like that. And so I naturally then went to study marketing because it was a good mix of the two. But then coming out of my degree, I had absolutely no idea what I wanted to do, because I kind of thought that you needed to get this degree to then get a job. But in some cases now, I guess the industry's adapting, and that is not necessarily the case. So then I also went full-time studying to then part-time. So I basically worked full-time while I was studying, and doing that I worked at an agency, and then I worked at my food bag doing customer success, and then it kind of led me to going traveling and then moving to Wellington to do the Hatch thing. So it was all kind of just, it stumbled into place, and then you find your way and you figure out what your skills are, you know, where they're needed and what you're good at. And I think naturally marketing is a good combination of that. And then finance allows me to be more like in someone's mind, into their decision-making process behind their money and things like that. And for me, the psychology piece is really important, but no huge defining moments. And I would say it's kind of still, it's always going to be a journey that adapts along the way.
Yeah, I mean, hey, I've had enough years in my career. It's still developing as well. But what about you, Kat? Your squiggly line has led you to New Zealand from Australia.
It has.
So tell us about that whole early career and the steps you've made.
Yeah, cool. So I think, you know, I feel like now looking back on it 10 years later, it's been quite a squiggly line, but initially it was very straight. And it was probably because I was one of those unique people that when I was leaving school and had finished my final studies, in my final year, I knew 100% what I wanted to do at university, because I knew I wanted to have a career in being a financial advisor. So I knew, like, going into my last year of school, these are the scores that I need to get into the university degree that I need to do to become a financial planner, and this is my path to do that. And I basically just executed on that, and then, you know, gave myself a year off after school to go and have some fun, and then came back to university and did my 3-year degree, went into financial planning as a kind of an associate advisor or a junior, and trained up through kind of, you know, doing the postgraduate study required in Australia to become a financial advisor, and then really just ambitiously ran on that path for quite a while. So, you know, did the typical thing of worked and learned a lot of skills and got education at one business, and then moved to a slightly bigger business, and then found my kind of niche working in a slightly smaller business with high net worth individuals under a really strong female founder. And that was really good. And that probably was about 6 years, coming up to 6 years into my career. And I was pretty sure that I wanted to continue doing that and working in financial services, but I then had the spanner thrown in the works that was my husband wanted to move back to New Zealand. So that, I guess, that was part of a career-defining moment in some senses, looking back on it. But the other part that was probably more impactful at that point in our journey was because of, I guess, the two of us kind of planning our finances together and making the decisions that we do, he turned around and really gave me, like, I don't want to say permission because that sounds a bit wrong, but it really was like he enabled me to quit my job without any idea
the
of
security,
what
peace of mind.
Yeah, exactly. Without any idea of where I was going to go and what I was going to do, and have zero pressure to figure it out, you know, immediately, which I'm exceptionally lucky to have. And I think that was really the career defining moment, because it meant that I kind of stepped off this path that I thought I was going down to just take a break, thinking I would step back on. But then the way that I have, I guess, re-entered financial services has been exceptionally different from what I initially imagined. So whilst I did, you know, working through that period of time, did work part-time remotely for a company in Australia, so still in like financial advice, whilst I sort of found my feet in New Zealand. When I eventually stepped back into a role in a New Zealand business in financial services, it was as head of marketing at Kernel. And that was obviously quite a career transition from, you know, being a financial advisor with high net worth individuals and millennials. So yeah, I think that for me was, I guess, the biggest defining moment in the sense that it just gave me a couple of years to just have some downtime and breathe and figure out what was important and figure out what parts of I had been doing that I really missed and that I wanted to continue to do, and also give me the opportunity to network and create relationships in New Zealand that then led to the job I have today.
I think that's, really important from both of you, that just creating some of this space, if you're not stuck in the BAU of doing a particular role, can provide some clarification, right?
Absolutely. Because I think, one of the conversations we used to have a lot when I was on kind of, I guess, corporate-y finance advisory side in some bigger businesses, and he was working for Jetstar in Australia. And, we both had sort of very busy jobs, and we would talk about this whole challenge around if you weren't quite satisfied in your job and you wanted to maybe, move somewhere else. It's really hard to do that when you're in a headspace of not necessarily like enjoying what you're doing right now, because then you don't give yourself the time and space to almost put your best foot forward in a new position. But it's also really hard if you're coming from a place of maybe not, feeling super fulfilled with what you're doing, not enjoying it. Perhaps there's been some issues to then go and figure out what is that next step, because that experience that you've just been through is kind of clouding what you're then looking for in a future role. And I definitely felt a little bit like I was in that stage. So having that break, or just being given the ability to have that break and not have the, pressures of immediately needing to go and get a job so that we could live and I could earn money, really meant that I had that flexibility to kind of think about, okay, well, what do I want to do? So,
I think throwing back to you, Christine, it shows kind of the bravery 2 weeks in at your recruitment role, just saying, this isn't right for me.
Yeah.
So being able to then go, I'm not going to sit through this.
Terrifying.
But really brave.
Yeah. I think it was a bit of a shock to the team for sure.
So although you might not have as much experience with this, Christine, I think I'll start with you, because you might also have some perspective from your friends that you speak with about the difference of working in, say, a longer established business. You've already mentioned Kernel it's a startup, but it's gone through rapid growth. So how do you think, or what have you seen from your friends and conversations you're having, that difference is between the mentality, the type of work, the collaboration, ways of working together?
Yeah, sure. So I guess, my experience so far is primarily in the startup space, but I've had a little bit of exposure. I did work at Bailey's part-time for a bit, so that's a decently established company. And I would say the real difference is the contentedness that you can have when you are a larger organization. So when you're at a startup, in my opinion, you have a drive to do better and innovate more. And you've kind of got this anything is possible perspective, rather than being happy to accept the status quo. And I think, that trickles through into so many things of what is possible around, like, your flexible working, or the output that you have with the work that you do, and the people that you work with, and just the organizational structure and all these kinds of things. And I think that can be such a huge, it can just influence every part of the business, and also how you then think as a person, and the kind of growth mindset that you do or don't have, which is going to trickle into your personal life and how you build relationships and all of these kinds of things. So that would probably be my biggest difference that I see.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And what about yourself there, Kat?
Yeah, so really good question, because I think it's something that I've probably changed my view on a little bit over the course of my experience. So I definitely think, for the vast majority of my career, in financial services and as an advisor, I worked predominantly in the early days in very well-established businesses. So, there were teams, they were like national, so offices all around Australia. And, in most of our offices in Melbourne, in 2 different companies I worked at, there were over 100 staff. So well-established businesses and processes and all that sort of thing. And as a junior, that was amazing, because it was a fantastic learning environment. It was really, really good, because I thrived off the fact that you have well-established processes and people can train you, and there's kind of a really well-defined hierarchy. And I really enjoyed that part of, I guess, a bigger company. then I did work in some smaller businesses in the financial advisory space. And that was kind of, I guess, my first introduction into more of the workplace dynamics and some of the politics. And you might think that there's like politics in a bigger business, and there are, but when, there's only 4 people in the team, actually interpersonal relationships are so much more important because you can't hide from anyone, and your contribution is a quarter of the business. So, those sorts of things really, really matter. And I think, depending on the type of person you are and maybe the level of the role that you have and the contribution you're making, there also comes a whole heap of other like pressures and stresses with that, of course. So, for me, I think there are so many fantastic opportunities with startups and smaller companies, and I've really seen that, and I love that part of it. But then on the flip side, I'm now very, very aware of the fact that that comes with an exceptional amount more of like stress, responsibility and pressure than say a role that I ever had. And I look at, one of my best friends in Melbourne, her and I started at the same company straight out of university, and we worked in the same company together. And then we both moved to a second company, and she's since stayed there. So that was one of the biggest businesses that I worked at, and she's since stayed there. And, her career has projected and like done exceptionally well there. And I've kind of hopped around and made some changes and other things. And sometimes, we talk about this. I look at her and she's like, she can go home at night. She doesn't have to worry about the bottom line. It's really easy. She's got a great salary. There's all of those sorts of things that sometimes I envy. And then she looks at me and is like, but the flip side, I guess, for her is, well, she now feels exceptionally nervous in her age and stage of life and career to make the decision that I had made and maybe leave that security. So it's not to say that either are right or wrong. It's just they're very different. And I think, a lot of it comes down to, I guess, knowing yourself a little bit and what kind of environment are you going to be best suited to, because, they're both great, but they're both challenging.
It's human nature too, right? To look over the fence, grass is greener. Did I make the right decision?
Yes.
I career pivoted, as I've talked about this a lot. I've done a lot of that myself. And that first pivot, I'd spent 14 years in my first industry. So that was scary. So not just changing necessarily a company, because I know that's the first big step for a lot of people, but then going, hey, I'm going to do something completely different. And there are times where I'm like, why did I put all this stress on myself and make these decisions? But then there's other times that I think I just would not have the depth of understanding of being so well-rounded in business and the networks that I've been lucky enough to establish without having to make some of those steps.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's no right or wrong.
There's not. And to be fair, sometimes I look at her career and I think, wow, like I wish I had that for myself. She's done exceptionally well, and I'm really proud of that. And there's a lot of achievement in that. And also, it's just, I think, oh God, I might have been a bit better financially ahead if I'd had a more secure salary and high levels of income over this period of time. And, but everyone has their own stresses in their day-to-day job. It's just what environment do you more thrive in? And this is something that Luke and I debate a lot, because I think sometimes he gets, sick of me. He's like, when will you find a job that you just don't complain about? And I'm like, I don't think that exists, babe. It's not a thing.
And you're not complaining, you're sharing ideas.
I know. I was like, I'm just coming home and like venting a little bit, or telling you this story and it is, I guess, also just human nature of, I'm sure most people's partners or family, they hear all the bad stories. You don't hear all the good stories all the time. So it is quite interesting though, because he's like, he has reflected back to me and said some of the things that I've said to him when I worked in a bigger business versus say where I work now at Kernel, like the underlying challenges are still the same. So he will often kind of pull me up and be like, this is not unique to this business and it's not unique to you. This is an issue that you encountered, way back when in this other business. So just gonna get you to check yourself on that, which is good. So, yeah.
I'm gonna get both of your perspectives on this, because one is around setting strategy, and then obviously you're one of the people, Christine, that, Kat has to set strategy for. So starting with you, Kat, what I love about Kernel is you have a mission to change the financial future of millions. I absolutely love that. So being the lead on marketing and customer strategy teams and where you're heading because the team is growing fast.
Yes.
So what's your process for strategic direction and how do you engage the Kernel team for that buy-in?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So, and something that I think we reflect on a lot internally as a team, both at sort of, the broader management team level and then also within, the marketing team and the customer success team. So, in terms of, setting the strategy, we very much have, a little bit of a radical transparency policy at Kernel around making sure that everyone's part of the discussion. So there are some things in our business that for, financial New Zealand's exceptionally small. I was going to say financial services is exceptionally small, but I think it probably
New Zealand financial services.
Yeah, it's all industries. So there are some things that, need to stay very kind of top level secretive until we're able to, go forward on a project. But the minute that we're able to do that, we will share that information with the whole team, regardless of what, if they're in the tech team or customer success or operations, so everyone knows we're thinking about doing this thing. Then how that filters down to kind of marketing and strategy. It's really a bit of a discussion in the sense that Christine and I have tried to manage the team that has kind of a clear delineation of like ownership pieces. So we kind of divided at the moment where Christine's really the owner of like content and conversion and the champion of that, and I'm the owner of acquisition. And as the team builds out, people will add into that and things will change. But we kind of, have structured in that way because we both know that we're not subject matter experts in everything. And I really value having her input on things like content and conversion because I can't be the best at everything. So, it's then about, discussing it internally within our team and then kind of filtering that through. You made a really good point of like, how do you take people on the journey or get buy-in from stakeholders? And this is something that, as with any new business, we've had to learn by trial by fire because there was no process to follow. And we've actually, we've stolen the tech team's idea on this because they obviously, run in an agile method and they do their 2-week sprints and all that sort of stuff. And at the end of every 2-week sprint, they have a 15-minute update to the whole office on a Friday afternoon, typically over a drink or like some chips. And they show us what they've been working on the last 2 weeks because, of course, as you would know in like tech, there's a whole heap that goes on behind the scenes that they've been doing a lot of hard work on that we would never see if we logged into the dashboard or, our kind of systems. So they've been doing that and then kind of realized, we realized that we essentially needed to do the same thing for marketing because exactly that. There's a whole heap of work that goes on in the background around marketing and strategy that people don't see. Half the team don't even see our billboards on the street. They don't know what, are we doing radio advertising this month? Like what's our kind of campaign focus? What's going on here? Who are we engaging with? So we try and do that relatively consistently, just to, champion not only like the wins that we're having, but really share the broader success of the whole team. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. I know at Freedom we used to do, I think it was quarterly, we had every department that would offer an overview of what they did because with a team of say 150 people, you can't do that every Friday, but you would give an overview of what your department did and some of the recent wins. And so devs would turn up and be like, don't sales just go out and have coffee every day? That is an important part of my process. However,
there's a lot
there
more
are
to
other
it.
things that go on.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, one of the things with that we've learned is as the team are growing, like there are other parts of the business that are probably growing faster than the marketing team is. And it's really important to bring all of those people on the journey, particularly because marketing relies on input from everyone. We have our operations team write content for us. They provide us updates. They give us all the stats that go on the website. Our tech team are building all of the things that are filtering back through to feedback from customers and, helping Christine with conversion. And we put a lot of pressure on those people to deliver on what we want. And it's like, well, why should they care? That's on us to make them care. And this is, our way of making sure that they're a part of, the marketing team's success, but also on board with helping us because ultimately it's going to help them.
And so I suppose for you, Christine, because it's not necessarily about developing that strategy yourself, but you have an area that you own. you have to get people to care, as Kat said. And you've seen some of that experience in other businesses where leadership teams maybe have wanted to get that buy-in from you. So where has that been successful? Where hasn't it in your experience? And why is it different now? And how are you developing your own style for that?
It's a great big question.
It is a big question. I was like, oh, I'm excited.
And go.
So yeah, I guess I would say the places or the times that I've seen that it hasn't been successful is when there aren't things in place, like Kat said, where you are taking the team on the journey with just openly sharing your metrics and whether you're making your goals or not, or like, you know, what do you have these billboards out, or what is this team doing? Because yeah, it's really easy to become disengaged. And I think also just like, even it's like, I guess it's keeping specific departments updated, and then it's ensuring that the whole team is updated. And I think at Kernel, Dean and Kat do that really well. So Dean does that with the whole team and just the general strategy of the company, as well as Kat does that like outward from the marketing team to update everyone. Yeah, I would say that's probably... What was the second half of the question?
How you're developing your own, your own style around that from what you've seen, and, you know, making it your own.
Yeah. So I would say right now, like with the content and conversion, it's kind of an ever evolving process. I wouldn't say that I'm crushing it yet, but I'm learning how to get people to care essentially about, you know, your blog that goes up on the website. Why do they really care about making it, you know, easy for you to edit or in the structure that you need? Because ultimately it affects how much time then I have to take to edit or to get that out. And if we're creating, actually also the relationship between content and conversion specifically of like, okay, so we're creating all this content, but if we're not spending any time to convert these people, then what's the point? Because you get them into the funnel, but then how do you turn them into customers? And so it's getting people to understand also how different parts of the marketing funnel work together cohesively to drive the outcome that ultimately the business is working towards. So for us, it's obviously like investors. So that is not just solely one part of the marketing team, it's everything. And it's also, that's why they should care about it, because it's ultimately the marketing function grows the business as much as other parts do. And I think that also leads to a bigger industry thing around marketing, is that the function can be quite undervalued in my perspective. And people just kind of think that you create pretty drawing like pictures and then put them out into the world, right? So it's taking them on the journey to also help you communicate the worth of the work that you do. I think that's really important.
I think on that, definitely. Like there's been so much work that Christine and I have both done, but I think, you know, one of our strengths is probably being quite reflective and having the ability to really think about, you know, how well are we taking people on the journey and showing our value, because it's not something that's naturally like comes to people, and it takes a lot to turn around and say, hey, actually, you know, we're doing this really well, like thanks, you know, and you do have to blow your own horn a little bit about it. And that for me has certainly been a learning journey, kind of transitioning from, you know, financial advice to being in marketing in a financial services firm, because it's one of also, I guess, the functions of the business that sometimes can be a little bit harder to show, in the sense that, you know, we were talking about this yesterday, like it's super easy for the operations team to show that they've delivered on their deliverables because, you know,
it's tangible, it's here.
Exactly. This fund is worth this much money. We've had this many new trades, like this performance has done this, whatever it might be. That's very, very black and white and easy to see. Whereas, you know, us saying, we're pretty sure that those billboards were like awesome isn't the same thing. And it's, you know, it's
so cool.
Exactly. And it is hard because it's, you know, you really have to have a lot of, I guess, conviction and self-belief that what you're doing is the right thing. And then also be humble enough that, you know, the first thing I will always say to the rest of the management team is like, we don't know if it's going to be successful. I'm not promising you anything. Like that is marketing. We're just trying our hardest.
Yeah.
There's so much
educated
gray.
guesses.
Yes, exactly.
It's an iteration. Marketing is that. I mean, we're going to get to that in just a second, so don't answer that question. I am really interested in this piece, though, because I know particularly for women, boundaries can be difficult to create. It can be something in a career where women feel that they are taken advantage of. So I really wanted both of you to share. So I'll start with you, Christine, a challenge or something that maybe was impactful to you that made you need to understand where your boundaries were and enforce them, and what advice you'd give to other young women in their career around that.
Yeah, sure. So my big thing and a challenge I think that is ongoing for me is work-life balance, and just finding a balance between my prioritizing my health and then also loving my job and the work that I do. And so reflecting on past roles, now I can sit and say, was it actually the role, or was it me that didn't have boundaries or put those boundaries up to that then created the environment where I was able to overwork? And I think ultimately it's probably a little bit of both. And so with that, the piece of advice that I would give, there's two of them. So firstly, if you're struggling, speak up. And if the people that you're speaking up to don't respond well, then maybe that's not the right place for you, because you would hope that the manager or the environment that you're in is going to respond well to your struggle. And then the second would be, don't attach your worth to your job, because I think it's such a big one. It's so easy to just kind of think that you are your job and your career, and that is the be all end all of your worth. And I guess looking at growing up in the society and the schooling system where achievement is just drummed into us, that we have to get an A and we have to be the best, and that's the pinnacle of society's success, I really would argue and say that it isn't. And so being happy and healthy is more important than being the best in your job, or just like sacrificing everything else for that. But then again, that's not everyone's perspective. So,
but then again, what is the best? You know, and the best change over your career too. I know that certainly shifted for me. But I think they're fantastic tips. It's so take heed. Yeah. And Kat.
I loved all of that. Mine is a little bit different, but I guess complementary in that. When I was reflecting on this question, I was like, what was one of those moments when I've really had to, I guess, challenged myself in terms of, making a stand on something or creating boundaries or just a really big learning experience. And this was to do with how much you get paid and kind of, I guess, knowing your worth and being comfortable to stand up for yourself. And this for me was a really interesting challenge, because it was actually a discussion that kind of turned into a little bit of an issue with my boss, who was also female. And I found that really, I think, probably took me off guard a little bit, because I didn't expect to necessarily have to have this conversation with her instinctively, which, that's on me. But what had happened was I was working in a business where she was very successful and had a lot of speaking engagements. So did a lot of presentations in financial services, really kind of was known as an expert in the industry, and was always afforded lots of different opportunities. And most of those opportunities she also got paid for. And she had kind of, I guess, taken me under her wing a little bit, and was helping me also then have some of those opportunities and saying no to a lot of things so that I could go and do them, which was amazing. And I was like, this is an awesome opportunity for my growth and my own profile, and kind of, carving out my area of expertise. And that was amazing. And then at some point, maybe kind of like 6 months into this journey, when I was like, often doing events and things on my own, own time outside of work that I wasn't getting paid for, doing a lot of preparation for these things, representing ultimately the business and also myself, I realized that she had been being paid for these things. And it only came about that one of the companies that I did a presentation for emailed me and said, can you send us through your invoice so that we can pay you for your time? And I didn't think anything of it, and I just did that. So I just sent them an invoice to be paid for my time for this presentation that I had done. And this then turned into a really big sticking point, because she believed that that money should have gone to the business. And then of course ensued this whole conversation around the fact that I, for one, was mortified that I had done the wrong thing. But then also it was this bigger discussion of it's like, well, hold on a second. Ultimately, who is this activity benefiting, and how much do I actually value my time and what I'm doing? And this kind of then led on to a bigger discussion of like knowing your worth, and is this something that's important enough for me to make a stand on? Because actually, someone was essentially profiting off the work that I was doing, and that warranted a discussion whether or not I should be paid for it, or it should be reflected as part of, bonuses or a higher salary, whatever it be. But it was just a very kind of tangible moment where I was like, oh, I'm not just, a salaried employee that like goes to work 9 to 5 and does their thing and leaves. There's actually a lot more to it than that. And I need to be aware of that. I need to be comfortable having those discussions. I need to push back, around working outside of hours that I'm not getting paid for, and making sure that I'm really comfortable with that sort of thing. And so that was, I guess, a bit of a defining moment for me, and a really uncomfortable discussion, if I'm honest. I was probably only 26 at the time.
Yeah.
And I hadn't had to have discussions like that before, because I'd only ever had practice negotiating my salary in a job interview, and then that's it. And it was really hard. But I think the lesson from that is we get advice all the time, and I am a big believer of saying yes to lots of things, but there does come a time where you can't just say yes to everything, and you do need to think through, is there, should I just be saying yes to this thing and maybe not getting paid for it, or there not be like a bigger goal that has been explicitly discussed that I'm then working towards? Because I think the problem that I fell into was I just kind of said yes on the basis that like, oh, this is a good opportunity. And then all of a sudden it kind of snowballed into this thing where I felt quite undervalued and hadn't really raised that. So again, learning on me, but just having that importance to really think about, okay, well, when do I need to put my hand up and say, I need to be paid for my time and I'm worth a bit more for this, and having the confidence to do that.
And that reflection piece is really important, which is why, it's great we have performance reviews that, as I've talked about here before, just understanding where you're, what's important to you at any stage. So, the first 6 months, 8 months of doing this new activity, of course, the learning growth opportunities for you were huge, and you were getting something out of that. Absolutely. Yes. But as that continues, and then the added layer, as you say, of not realizing someone's getting paid specifically for your services. For these
activities. Yep, exactly.
It's a really different dynamic.
It
because
is.
A lot of roles you go in and you know that that's what's expected up front. So that is, you don't need to have that discussion again. So I think that's a really great display of how a role can shift and change, and that you need to be aware of when it's
definitely
important to have that conversation.
Yeah. And I think, just back to your starting question of like particularly issues as women, like I still struggle now to have good conversations around how much I should be paid and what my salary and worth is. And, I second guess everything, and it drives Luke mental because we talk about it a lot. And he's like, Jesus, woman, you've thought about this for 6 weeks. Like just do something already, and it is really hard. And I think it's a learned skill for me, and having that awareness that this is not obviously a conversation that I naturally feel comfortable having, and I really need to lean into that and force myself to, go forward with it is important. And that's something that, 10 years into my career, I'm still learning. I haven't mastered. And so, just I guess when the kind of learning for me on this is when something feels uncomfortable, you should probably really think about why that is and force yourself to continue doing more of that.
Yeah, no, I understand.
Yep.
We're going to head back into the world of marketing now. Christine, what does marketing mean to you? We touched on it a little bit. And what does an average day at Kernel look like for you?
Yeah, sure. So firstly, I think marketing for me is creativity. So I think it's a huge part of what we do. And it's kind of incorporated in every task that I do in some way. But then at a broader business level, I would say it's how you grow the business. And I think it's personally, my perspective is that a lot of leaders can be mistaken in thinking that marketing isn't necessary, and it's not going to get the business to their goals. And if you have that perspective, then you're already kind of putting your business on a back foot, because the function is really necessary. And then an average day at Kernel is a huge range of different things.
Yeah.
It can start with a to-do list and then end up not doing any of them. But it's very agile, and it's a mix between content and conversion. But like at the moment, we're going through working on our customer personas and things like that, and trying to find media placement or reaching out to people to get Kat on a podcast or things like that. So it's a huge variety.
Yep.
Love that. And what about you, Kat?
Good question. So I guess marketing for me is more about connecting people who obviously end up being your customers to the idea or the emotion or the feeling that you're trying to essentially sell, because let's be honest, we're all here to sell something, and marketing is helping us sell what that thing is. And it's less around the product and more about how is it that we're trying to impact the end consumer, and what kind of change are we hoping to drive either in their life, or what feeling are we hoping to instill, which is why I love what I do, because that for me is a very natural crossover, I think, to say like financial planning and helping people gain clarity around their own personal finances and feeling really confident in themselves. Then, so I love that part of it. And then I just think, the rest of it is all just the functions of how we achieve that. So I'm a bit more kind of, I guess, bigger picture, like touchy-feely stuff when it comes to marketing, and less about like the nitty-gritty of then how we actually do that. Because let's be honest, like you can learn things really easily, but really understanding who that person is and what change or outcome you're trying to drive in that individual is really important. And then, exactly what Christine said about our kind of like day-to-day days at Kernel are just so different. I think we've committed within the marketing team to make a purposeful effort to reduce our weekly to-do lists, because we were both falling into that trap of, we have a meeting for marketing customer success for an hour on Mondays to run through everyone's weeks, and we would kind of both come into that meeting and have 50 things on our to-do lists, and then you just feel crap by the time you get to 4 o'clock on a Friday. I know, because you haven't done anything. So we've committed to making it only like, what's your 3 top priorities? And to be honest, we're finding that really hard. So I think we're trying to have a little bit more sort of set focus. But one thing that we've both really focused on, and I think obviously COVID's changed this a little bit, but prior to working from home, was creating a lot of structure, or more structure in our week, because it is really hard to have any kind of structure when you work in a startup or a small business. And making, we've done little simple things like we have blocked out like no external meeting times on Mondays and Fridays, to really make sure we have focused time for the team, and particularly for me, so I have time where I'm not being drawn out of the office and I can provide the support that the team needs. And then also making sure, I'm working 1 day a week from home at the moment, and just creating, I guess, a few more like boundaries around our time, so that then our days are a bit more achievable. Otherwise, you just fully overwhelmed. It's easy to do.
I completely just sympathize and understand the whole to-do list point. When you have a variety of different tasks and it is resource light, that is one of the big differences, right, of having a number of people in an organization you work with that can support some different areas. And
absolutely. And I feel like, even 2 years in, whilst we now have slightly more well-defined teams and people in those teams, everyone's job is still very, crossover between lots of different functions. And so, I feel for Christine sometimes in the sense that while she's marketing manager, there's a lot of stuff that she also does outside of, that scope. And that's the same for everyone. So that's the fun part, in that you do have variety. And sometimes when, if you don't feel like writing a blog or focusing on acquisition today, you can do something that's a little more, light on in terms of mental load. And that's good. But then that comes with a trade-off of sometimes feeling like you're pulled in every direction.
No, I get that.
I'm sure lots of people do.
Exactly. Christine, there are some really open and vulnerable conversations around money on It's No Secret, podcast you both fantastically co-host, and normalizing those conversations. So been on there myself, shared some pretty vulnerable stuff. I love what you guys are doing there. But what's a really enlightening or aha moment that you've had from a guest on your podcast?
Yeah, so I think this moment or these moments aren't with regards to money specifically. It's more about the people. So in the money moments episodes, I think the biggest thing for me is that you never truly know anything about anyone. So you can understand what they tell you, but you learn more through what they say, but then also everyone always surprises you. So I think, a good friend Jervis came on the podcast. He also helps us with our digital advertising. And I thought I knew him pretty well, but then once he shared his whole money journey, I was just sat back and was like, oh my goodness. But it was so inspiring. And I learned that he wants to be
You're not the human I thought you were.
Yeah, exactly. So it's that you never truly know anything. And I think the same, it makes me reflect on how much I guess I tell other people, or what kind of side of me I show, even on the podcast. So I've said to Kat a couple of times that I feel like I need to be more vulnerable because these people are coming on and really sharing about their stories. And so am I embodying what they're doing? That's probably a nice aha moment for me.
It's a really difficult balance too sometimes, right? Because you want to give that space. But there are really nice segues that can allow you to open up. I think you've shared some fantastic things, both of you. It's been really insightful and just inspiring to hear that with a Kiwi lens, which is the same as what I'm attempting to do here, is just give people something a little more local and relatable.
Yes.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks.
Kat, because you've been in both, what tips do you have for someone working in a large organisation that wants to build their personal brand and get that visibility and open those opportunities? Now that you're the key marketer you are.
Such a great one. No, I feel like that's such an important question, because sometimes I think, if you're in a bigger organisation, you can feel a little bit like a number, or that you're just very well defined into your role. And if you want to try and break out of that a bit, or as you say, grow your personal brand, it's super important, because ultimately, the lesson that I have learned multiple times over is, those businesses don't owe you anything. And whilst that you might be really happy there and you're making a great contribution, ultimately you do need to look out for yourself. And so I think the personal branding thing is super important, because that's a way that you can do that. I think here in NZ, it really sort of depends. My first point would be really try and engage in any kind of group in your industry. So I know in financial services, and it's nice that we've got the crossover to marketing as well, because we've got like the Marketing Association, but then also we've got InFins, and then there's also like the financial advisor networks. And so for me, I try and make quite a active effort to get involved in a lot of those events. And I think if you're in a big organization, hot tip, you can probably get them to pay for your membership. So they're likely to have the budget. So, think about what is it from their point of view that is valuable for you to be attending these things. Ultimately, this is a great way for them to be getting their employees out there and networking and branding a little bit on behalf of the business as well. But then you get the double whammy of you can attend events and also network in groups that will ultimately help with your progress. So I definitely think there's that. And then also just looking for opportunities where both of you can benefit. So, a great example of this is the podcast, right? And whilst Kernel is a small business, there's a lot of natural crossover where the podcast, you could look at It's No Secret and think like, this is really great for Kat and Christine, or this is really great for the business. And the reality is that it's great for both of those outcomes. It builds our brand and what we stand for, but then also it has a flow back effect to the business. So are there things, not saying that everyone should start a podcast, because it's also a lot of work, but
there's a lot of work.
Are there little things like that you can kind of tap into what you really enjoy and where you'd like to project yourself in a way that also benefits the business, or is something that they would be happy to support? Because I think Christine and I talk about this a lot, in that I'm like, it's often easier as a manager to get behind or have the available spend to support, you know, that kind of growth, as it may be to, you know, go and get someone a pay rise, if that makes sense. Like I've probably, you know, broadly generalizing, but got a little bit more flex to say, hey, actually, we would happily support putting you through this course because it's good for you and it's good for us, than to necessarily go and try and negotiate a $5,000 pay rise so that you can go and pay for that course yourself. And just, I think, encouraging people to like think outside the box in terms of what can you get the organization to support you on, both monetarily, but also from time. So that's the other thing. You know, can you get some time during work hours to go and do these endeavors?
Yeah, no, I think those are all absolutely fantastic tips, and certainly things that I've taken up on my career journey.
Yes, exactly.
Being we're in lockdown for 2 more weeks.
Yes.
Really interested to understand. This affects people in different ways. So I think just starting with you, Christine, how has COVID changed the way that you work, but also how you approach marketing and strategy for that external engagement? How are you changing?
Yeah, for sure. So how I work, it's really brought out my introvert side. So I always thought that I was like 90% extrovert and 10% introvert. I think I'm about 50-50. And so, yeah, naturally working from home obviously has its ups and downs, but a big up for me is that I am really, can be really productive, and I do also like having that kind of alone time. But then I guess this lockdown is very different to last lockdown in that I kind of really overworked in the last lockdown, and so trying to think about those boundaries again. And so, and how COVID has changed marketing for me is probably an obvious answer, but the empathy piece around understanding that other people are not in the same shoes as you, and every investor looks different for us. So, yeah, trying to have a bit more compassion in your comms. But also, I had a conversation about this the other day, actually, about not just jumping on the bandwagon of, oh, okay, we're in another lockdown, so we're going to post another post or make another post about, you know, stay safe and things like that. How can we kind of reach these people in a way that is a little bit more authentic and shows our true empathy rather than it being something that we just do because everyone else is doing? So, yeah, I'd probably say in those struggling times, that's how it's changed.
You made brownies. That's how.
Yeah, exactly.
Do some baking. Yeah.
I'm now a kitchen
I
master.
love that reel. It's like, this is what people need
exactly.
in lockdown.
Reels are actually really hard to make as well.
But hey, they took 3 seconds, so if only people know.
Yeah.
What about you, Kat? How has that working dynamic changed? Particularly also, I think, with the lens of being part of the leadership team and lots still happening in terms of growth with Kernel.
Yeah.
What's changed for you?
Oh, really good question. So I think, you know, at a very basic level, not a lot, in the sense that we're very lucky that our business is fully digital anyway. So it has been super easy for everyone to literally just pick up their laptops and go home. And most people, because Auckland's been through this before, like have screens and stuff, you know, well set up already. So that was, I guess, a blessing because that part of it's quite easy. The hardest part is obviously the people management and making sure that everyone is okay and feels safe and, you know, still motivated and is aware of the fact that they need to continue doing their jobs, but also we want them to take breaks and make sure that they're not, you know, working all the time, because I think lockdown 1 taught me in particular, but lots of people, that actually it's really easy to work a lot when your laptop might be in your living room and you can see it from your kitchen and you're constantly thinking about it because it's literally in your physical space and you can't leave. So that's, you know, been a bit of a challenge. But then I guess the other one is, and Christine and I, you know, we do try and take quite that whole radical transparency and honesty view. Had a chat about this the other day where, you know, just recognizing that everyone is on their own journey during like these sorts of times. And Christina, she won't mind me sharing this, was having a particularly crap day and I was having a fantastic day. And then the next day I was having a shitty day and she was having a great day. And that's absolutely fine. But it's relevant for us to be open with our communication about that, because I don't want to put pressure on her when I'm having a really good day, pumping out this work, messaging her on Slack, doing all these things, if she's just not in a headspace to be receiving that information at that point in time, and it doesn't matter if that happened on a Thursday or a Friday. Ultimately, our team's going to get the job done. It's just, I guess, we are making a conscious effort to check in with everyone, but not to do too much, because not everyone loves spending heaps of time on Zoom. So that's a bit of a fine balance of, making sure that everyone feels supported, but they're not like they're having to be on a screen all the time. And then I think more so on the marketing front, Christine just hit the nail on the head in the sense that we are conscious, because I think, for me, having lived this, like, in lockdown 1, my husband was losing his job and it was genuinely the most stressful time we had probably been through in the last 3 years, versus now he's a stay-at-home husband and he cooks me dinner every night. It's bloody fantastic. So I have had very different experiences, and so I can now see, I guess, how, you just don't know what someone else is going through. So trying to, have a bit of a catch-all of just being quite neutral but positive in our comms, so that people feel like it's not too much for whatever frame of mind they're in. That's probably our biggest marketing challenge, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it absolutely does.
Yeah.
I'm just going to call out, I know we've gone over time. Do you guys still have a few minutes to finish off?
Yeah, we do. That's fine.
I should have booked a little longer. I knew we were going to just have
fine.
chat.
No,
this is great. So let's start with you, Kat. What's the next big career goal for you?
Oh, such a good question. I am like, I don't even know.
What is that?
Yeah, I know, truly. So I think, to be honest, it would be being part of the senior leadership team at Kernel. I'm obviously already part of that as default, being, one of the founding employees. And I guess I'm just well aware that, a couple of things. This is my dream job. Like, I love my job and I love working at Kernel. Oh, he knows, Rosie. I remind him every week. But that, I think the experiences that I'm going through, though, as being part of the leadership team and growing the marketing team and supporting others, are very new for me. So it's really just about, I guess, cementing that and really growing those skills and leaning into those things that are uncomfortable. Managing people is not easy. Managing budgets is not easy. And then as part of that, there's a lot of personal growth around, I have an extremely heightened sense of responsibility for the success of the business, but also for the success of all my team. And that's really, I really enjoy that. But then it comes with the flip side of, I need to make sure that I'm creating very good boundaries around, my mental health and how much time out I have, and also making sure that I'm well cared for, because everyone knows you can't fill from an empty cup. And just making sure that I'm not jumping on this rabbit wheel and running relentlessly for the next 5 years and then just burning out. So that's probably, I don't know if that's necessarily a career goal, but it's more just my next career state. I feel like that's where I'm at, and those are the skills that I want to learn and really hone in on.
And I think that's really important to share, because going to you now, Christine, that lens of where you want to head, and if that's still the 5 years here, or if you're looking well ahead into a 10 or 20-year future, what does that mean for you?
Yeah, sure. So immediate short-term goals is, I would love to be managing someone this time next year and building the muscle of how do I actually step into the role that I've looked up to for a while. And because I know it's a lot harder than it looks. And so, really, I guess the next 5 years is building muscles in different areas that I haven't before, similar to what Kat is, but in a different way, I guess. But also kind of cementing the areas that I think that I'm good at, or that I would like to double down on. So whether that's content and conversion, or even just building those soft skills. And long term, I'm not so sure. I think I used to have a finite idea of where I'd like my career to go, but as you kind of get on the path, you just get more confused.
Yeah, it's and And I think important to note as well, particularly in your industry, technology is going to continue to impact, right? So how that continues to develop marketing and the way that you interact with your audience and who that audience is and how that grows will also contribute to new opportunities that might not exist today.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Which is exciting.
On that, one thing I will say is that I really do think that there is always going to be a place for creativity in the future, whether that is creative problem solving or marketing or things like that. I think, you know, as automation comes into play, it's just something that's going to be really hard to replicate. So, keeping creativity a part of my job, maybe.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So, Kat, what does being whole human, imperfect, and real mean to you?
Oh, such a good one. I think so. My easy answer to this would be just showing up every day with my real self, not my best self, because I think we're conditioned to be our best selves. And where I have, I guess, gotten to in my career, but also my life journey, I realize that like you can't be your best self every day, and that's absolutely fine. And so authenticity and realness for me is more about recognizing when those times are and being able to share that with your team. You know, Christine and I feel like we obviously don't do any work. We just chat about things. So I was just about to say, we were just chatting about this the other night around, you know, one of my personal goals is to really work on creating psychological safety in the teams that I lead and making sure that people feel comfortable sharing those sorts of things, because, you know, a great thing about the podcast is we do that, but it's a little bit more uncomfortable to transition that into a work environment. So how do I kind of bring my full authenticity and openness and into the team, and also really drive that? I guess, you know, I feel like I have a lot of sense of responsibility, having worked in businesses where we've had great business leaders, but perhaps not great business leaders that have supported, you know, mental health initiatives and making sure that people are okay in every aspect of their lives. I really want to champion that in the leadership team. And I think, well, I hope that I've started to do that quite well. But we talk a lot about Kernel, you know, at Kernel, that we obviously want to change the financial future of millions, and we want people to be well from a financial standpoint, and there's so much on the mental health side that feeds into that. So it would be remiss of us to just think that, you know, people are going to be financially secure and happy if they are investing. You know, there's a lot of other things that sit behind that. So that for me is a big focus, and I guess what I'm most passionate about when it comes to like authenticity.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I think there's an awareness there that a lot of leaders can take some lessons from that piece you spoke earlier about, and syncing and understanding where Christine is for her days. There are too many leaders that I'm having a great day, so everyone in my team can be 120% productive.
Everyone's going to work really hard because I've had 3 coffees and I'm feeling fabulous and I'm super productive today. And you know, I've been on the other side of that.
There's nothing
exactly, and there's nothing worse than feeling like, oh my gosh, I'm just, you know, I've gotten to work and I just need to do my work, and someone is Energizer Bunny and you're just not there, and you feel like the dead weight of the team. It's like, oh God, So it is a lot about, I think, self-awareness.
Yeah. What about you, Christine? What about your whole human, real and imperfect self? What does that mean?
Yeah, I feel like Kat kind of summed it up really nicely.
Right.
But yeah, so I guess what I wrote for this answer was sharing when you're in the struggle and not judging other people for theirs. So it is the vulnerability piece of sharing about the lows just as much as the highs. But I also think too that celebrating those highs when you do have them, because as Kiwis we don't do it as much maybe as we should, or maybe as Australians. So it's showing every part. And also I think, to Kat's point, is you're a human outside of work as well. It's understanding that you have needs outside of your day job just as much as you do in that environment. And if you can understand that of other people too, that's how you're going to be able to be a bit more compassionate and empathetic towards them, especially in things like times like lockdown. So if, like kids, right? I don't have kids, so it's a little bit harder for me to relate, but I can imagine it would be hard having them running around behind you all the time. So yeah, I'd say that's probably very similar.
And it's even the different stages of that, because I've worked with colleagues that have, like Michael has 2 young boys and one's just started school, one's a toddler. I have a 15-year-old, but he's in his NCEA first year. So very different struggles, but still needs, and how do you support? And then, yes, colleagues that have other challenges going on that might be isolating by themselves and just feeling really alone. So it is it's a different landscape for us all. But the fact we're having these conversations, and I think they're coming more readily, and we are seeing more people, more of a whole human person in our work environment, is really heartening to me.
Yeah. And I think with that, Rosie, it's like, you know, people can see you at work. You know, I think sometimes it's quite scary to feel like you have to show up as your whole human self. But the reality is any good leader or, colleague can probably see a little bit of what you're going through anyway before you even shared that thing. You know, I think of our team, and anytime I've kind of shared openly with someone that I'm feeling something that perhaps I've struggled with, or, I'm going through a challenging time, they're like, oh yeah, we could tell, we just didn't want to ask you. We could tell that there was this thing. And so, it's, I guess, to the person that's going through that, it's always, I think, a bit less difficult to actually open up on that conversation than perhaps I necessarily think, because I guarantee you that for most of those other people that you're telling it to or sharing with, they will be aware in some level, and they will know because they might be expecting that this conversation is coming. So if that kind of, I guess, gives people the confidence to just actually open up a little bit, I hope that's the case, because yes. And if your leader or your colleague doesn't, then that's a bigger issue. Maybe find someone else.
Yeah, time to change jobs.
That's
on them.
True.
That's not on you. So
Yeah. We have come to the end. Really keen to know if there's anything else, any last words, any great stories that you'd like to share.
I think I would just probably reiterate a similar message to your podcast, because I love these discussions that you're having, Rosie, around what we talk about a lot on It's No Secret, where it's so easy to look at people on face value. And we talk about it from a financial standpoint of, you see what someone has in their career or on Instagram, and you make a lot of assumptions around how they got there from a monetary standpoint. And I know I do the same thing on, say, LinkedIn. I love LinkedIn. I love, seeing people's posts and their career journeys, and you make so many assumptions about, wow, how did that person actually get there? And they're so successful, but we don't know any of the detail that underlines that, and the challenges that they went through. And so thank you very much for, I guess, encouraging open conversation around it, because as you said at the start, it's not a straight line. They're very squiggly. And it's those sorts of insights that I think help other people get to where they want to go for their own career journey.
Thank you. I think that's been really eye-opening for me too, is just particularly, a lot of these very senior people in New Zealand, and you're like, So those exact same aha moments as you, Christine. And what about some last words from you?
Mine would probably be going back to the piece around knowing your worth and having confidence in who you are, because I think, knowing your worth is tied very closely to understanding yourself, but also just general confidence in being okay to be yourself, and then knowing that that's going to get you to the place that you need to go. So, and it feeds into everything of building your brand and being authentically you and showing up as real and all these kinds of things. So, take the time to understand who you are, what your needs are, what you value, and then that kind of will trickle into everything else. It would be my last parting words.
I have so enjoyed being able to gain all these fantastic nuggets from you both. It's just been amazing to be on both sides of both of our podcasts and get to know Kernel and its members a little bit more. Thank you for spending this time with me. It's such an honor.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, it's so nice. It's so fun to actually reflect on things, because I guess, when else do you think about, like, what did I do when I was 22?
Exactly. Aside from the tequila laybacks.
Exactly. So thank you, Rosie. It's been fun to go down memory lane and, have a bit of reflection time.
Yeah, definitely.
I'm going to stop the recording now, and so if we just hold on until